We have a small practice. A small design practice, under 10 people. We believe in employing landscape architects in our office, but we don't contain ourselves too much or box ourselves too much in terms of what we do. So we are forever exploring the boundaries or pushing the boundaries of what landscape architects do. I think there's a well-established professions in other parts of the world, but in South Africa we're still sort of making headway into what landscape architects should be doing. So these are some of the projects that we've been involved with in the last couple of years. Some of them you might know. Some of them are very heritage-driven. Some projects are leisure-driven. So we get our work from wherever we can get it and try and make it as good as we can. So I think that's just shows some of the projects that we work. These are current projects on the drawing board. I'm not going to talk about these. When I go through the examples of the projects that we're involved with, we'll pick up on some of these as well. So what is it that landscape architects do? And what is the general perception? So this is quite an interesting thing for us because we really struggle with perceptions and what we do. And I think it's probably often because we're not really sure what we're doing. So some people think we do that, or sort of more traditional horticultural work. Very nice though. And then Will Alsop's comment that landscape architects shouldn't be doing landscape commissions, just because we institutionalize spaces, which is something that might happen in Europe, but it's definitely not something that happens in this country. And this is coming from someone that does a drawing like that, which I'm not sure if that equates to good landscape. So in the profession of landscape architecture, we've also have this idea of star landscape architects, and these are some of the sort of cutting-edge landscape architects, as Adrian Geers from West Aid, Martha Schwartz, Rainer Schmidt, Michael Falkenberg, Peter Walker, James Corner, just to name a few, and some of the work that these landscape architects have been working on all over the world. So I just want to give a bit of international perspective, because that in a way becomes a gauge to where we want to measure ourselves as landscape architects in this country, and whether, if we look at this work, and we look at it critically, if it's appropriate for what we're doing in this country. The High Line, which is a very well-known project by James Corner in field operations with Dilys Scofidio. Very significant piece of work that happened it was conceived over 15 years. It culminated in a competition, and it was designed by an architectural and a landscape architectural team. And it shows what can be done as a very powerful intervention within the inner city of New York. Catherine Gustafson with Gustafson Porter's Hyde Park, Diana Memorial, which is things that are quite close to what we're doing as landscape architects in this country, and this is just the beautiful public space. So how do landscape architects define themselves? And this is something that I pulled off the internet, and I was actually quite amazed that landscape architects are the begin-all and end-all of everything. And so you'll see it's psychology and geography and ecology and all of that stuff, and it actually just means nothing. So what we thought is, what is landscape, or what is landscape architecture? What do we do? And what we realized is that everything is part of the landscape. So when you stand back, if you come close, you see the detail, and when you move back, everything becomes landscape. And I really like this Libius Woods drawing that starts resembling a very complex historical layering of architecture and infrastructure, and all becoming one landscape. So I'll talk a little bit slower on these because I think I'm rushing through the presentation. And I want to show 3 projects that our office has been involved with. The one at the top, the Sharpeville Memorial, is a constructed project. The one in the middle is a more theoretical project. It was a competition that never had an end. So, but we thought there was something valuable in terms of the story and how we developed the concept. And the bottom is a project we're currently busy with in Kenya called Two Rivers, and it's a mixed-use development. And I want to show the interaction that we had with the architectural team, which we treasure that experience of negotiating, sharing, influencing each other's work. And I think this was a good example of that. And that's still going to be built. We're going into construction in the middle of the year. So Sharpeville is a commemorative site. If you look at this image here, this is Joburg. This is about a 60 kilometers as the crow flies to Sharpeville Vereniging. It was a hot spot in the 60s from a political point of view, and it culminated in a massacre of 69 people that were shot, and most of them were shot in their backs, a lot of them were shot in their backs, and while they were running away from the police because it got quite heated. And the protest was against the pass system, which I don't know if everybody is aware of that, but it meant that if you're black or you had to carry a passbook to allow you access into white areas. And this was a protest against that, and as I said, it got heated, and it culminated in 69 people got shot. And it was a turning point in South Africa's history. This is the site that we're working on is this site where these graves are. And it was informal cemetery. It wasn't a formalized cemetery. They just dug these holes, and people were just buried there. So you'll see 8 women and children were massacred by the police. So this is the site. When we got involved in the project, we got involved through an urban design practice. Actually, 2 ways. We were responsible for the master plan for this and an urban design practice called ASM that we do a lot of work with. We're doing a framework for a whole lot of projects in the Sharpeville area because it had such an important part of South Africa's history. It was also the place where the Constitution was signed. South Africa's current Constitution is signed here. So the local authorities had this idea of doing a heritage trail. This is the cemetery. This is Sharpeville, which is very low income residences, but quite an established community, and with very strong opinions, and very proud of where they live. And they all worked on these large industrial areas that surrounds Vereniging, Sharpeville, or the Sedibeng environment or area. So there was a framework that allocated this space. This is the cemetery. It's still very much an informal cemetery. So people just get buried wherever they find a spot. And it's in atrocious conditions in terms of burial because the water table is incredibly high. So there was a proposal here to connect the community with the cemetery, but although this is a place of memory and burial, we felt that was kind of segregated by this big concrete fence that wraps around the cemetery. So the urban designers and us had a long conversation, and we decided perhaps we should look at a memorial garden within the cemetery area. And so we investigated, we walked through, and a lot of these graves are unmarked, and they just often don't have a headstone whatsoever. And we decided the only place to do it is to do it on an existing piece of infrastructure, which is the road that comes in from the main road that leads to an industrial area, and use that surface to place a memorial garden. So that's what we've done, and we then progressed with that. If you go, I just want to go back 1 slide. Oops. Okay. Those 69 graves sit here. They're located in this line. So over time, this infrastructure, this sort of informal infrastructure is developed. And this is what you see. There's the graves. These are sort of informal pathways, graves everywhere. So it's slightly light, but that's what I explained. This memorial garden, we thought it could be work better there inside the cemetery. And every year they have a commemorative function within this space. So we needed to provide a space where you can have a large gathering up to 5,000 people coming into this space on an event or a commemoration day. So we said, okay, but then we have to develop a route that goes through, that connects that space where the memorial is to the graves, but we realized that we couldn't put a gathering space there because there's just too many graves in this area. So we formalized some of the routes. So you would enter from this side, you would move past the graves. This was clean. The idea was to clean this up around and then back out from the way you come. And we'd like the idea that people arrive here because that becomes the connection with the community. So this is just dealing with the problems that we had. It's a very flat site. So because of our concerns about finding more graves on the site, and there was no process of finding to see if it's possible if there could be graves there, we realized that we might have to lift the landscape. And on the site there are areas which they couldn't use, and they just lifted the landscape up. So we decided, okay, lifting the landscape does two things. It allows us a better vantage point to look over the cemetery and bring the context into focus, and also avoid sort of digging and then finding informal graves. So this is what we created. We decided, okay, now you have to, in this space, you need to accommodate 5,000 people. And we decided to push the one side down, create this kind of sloped geometry that just tilts out of the ground, almost like you've pushed it on the end. And then we realized, but what happens if this space, if you don't have a large event? Can it actually accommodate smaller events? So we bit back into it, and we created a smaller space, and the remainder we placed it on axis with the grave. So when at that point there, you're on axis with the grave. So that in a way I'll show you some of the images now. And then we realized that we have to bookend that space. So this is about 250 meters in length, and we decided to put a marker in the ground, building a very simple wall that would be made by the community. Actually, that pushed us to the next thing that said the whole thing has to be built by the community. So we did a diagram that shows how that could be, two diagrams, and then thought, how are we going to make this? So that's just the site. These are the graves. And this work here was done prior to our involvement here, but these plaques were placed with the graves that didn't have headstones on, and that was done by Sarah at the time. So we thought about where we're building, and we said, okay, if we're going to be building it by the people, what do the people in this area do? Most of them work in the steel manufacturing industry. So we really liked the idea that steel became a language for commemoration. And the commemorative elements on this project are made of raw steel tubes. We work with an artist that we sneaked into the project that did some details at the top that sort of resemble a flower, almost a bouquet, put on top of the steel pole. And that's what that space looks like. Now, this whole project is built out of brick, and it's laid by hand through people that were trained within that community. So all the materials, I would say 95% of the materials on the site comes within a 10-kilometer radius, and the whole project was built by people within that community. I think the lights were the only things that are pre-manufactured, and I think they come from Germany. Well, they're made here, but they're a German product. So when you go on top of that sloped area where there would be a large gathering, you would see this steel tubular structure. And we worked with the idea of landscape because everything's quite flat. And we like that this steel comes into context with this very large, heavy industrial steel manufacturing infrastructure. And this is the brickwork. Every single one of these bricks were drawn. In our office, every single brick was drawn, every module, everything we knew exactly where the junctions were, so this created that smaller amphitheatre that brings another context into view. We had this idea of putting names on these steel poles because they face the community. These steel elements that are built into this raw brick wall face towards the community. And we wanted to put names on here, but we just couldn't get the process formalized, and there was too many discrepancies in terms of historical record, in terms of names and spelling and so on. So we kept them anonymous, and I think in a way that was a better outcome. So that gives you a slightly different view approaching the memorial garden itself. Okay, this is it's quite an interesting project for us because we were asked to do this as a competition, and it was quite a sort of a harebrained idea by the proponents of the competition. And the idea was to celebrate the 100 years of the ANC's existence. That was, I think, last year or the year before, I can't remember. And they, one of the ANC's, one of the founders of the ANC's children decided this is a project that should be promoted. So we said, okay, what do we do? Do we go as a very big project or a small project, or what do we do? And this is quite a strange site. If you look at the site, oops. That's the very famous World Cup Stadium. What's it called now? I don't know. It's changed its name, National Stadium. So this is the site of the National Stadium, and right opposite this road here, there's a, I'm sorry, I'll check. I think this one here. I can't exactly remember what the orientation is here. There's the site that where this thing is. And what we realized is that if this was going to be a heritage park, the biggest advantage that it has working for it is this stadium, which can decant into that park. So 90,000 people come into this space. At the moment, there's no decant space for this whole facility, and we like the idea that you can decant into a space that's adjacent to that. So we said, what does that do? We did this diagram that says this is the stadium. We need to somehow find a route through the landscape. And we were asked by the architects to do this proposal, but we felt that it actually needed an architect. So we decided, okay, well, we'll give some cues and we'll build some structure into the design as best we can as landscape architects to create a place that works. So that's when it's superimposed onto our ultimate framework drawing. This is just some sketches as how the stadium sits on this side. We decided to bank this one side because it's quite a busy road, to bank quite a large, high-density, critical mass development on this side, and then open a gap which sort of has this connection with the stadium, almost like this interruption, and it creates a piazza space and a journey around that. And what the nice thing about it is when you're at the end there, you'll be able to look at the city. And so we developed this series of sketches as good as landscape architects could do them. And as you move through this, and sort of a journey through the spaces. So the brief was quite determined. So we had to work with some of these elements. And we like the idea that there's some indoor and outdoor spaces, and then decanting into a large people's park. So that's the master plan and how we saw it being phased. That's what we call a really memorial site, but a large gathering site can take 10,000 people. So you can decant 10,000 people into after match or after concert or event into this space and energize this whole park. So this is hotel, commercial, all those things that make up sort of new urbanist development, and then the park that gets framed by that. So that's the stadium on that side. You'll be able to come through here, you'll be able to stand on this ledge and look over the city or around a large event. Okay, this takes me to the last project. We more and more our office we've starting to sort of do work outside of South Africa. We've been very isolated, and I think a lot of architectural practices has done that as well. So we got involved in this project. We got a phone call from someone in Nairobi, and they said, no, they have this project, and they want us to put a proposal together for it. And we did it, and they selected our team to develop a design concept. At the time, they had an urban designer on the project, and they didn't have a separate architect on the project, which they intended to appoint. Later on, an architect was brought in, a South African architect that was brought in to develop a retail scheme for that site. So here you can see that's Nairobi Central. That's the site. It's about 9 kilometers. So it's quite close to the center of Nairobi. And the urban designers, with the architects, eventually designed this scheme, which is sort of very similar to Melrose Arch in a way. And the project's called Two Rivers, and the reason for it's got surrounded by 2 rivers. The one is sort of a fast-flowing river, and the other sort of much low-key river that sort of winds its way through here. And we realized this was the first scheme that was put on the table by the architects. Was just a massing model, just to see how that fits into the urban design framework. And I think this was before we got involved. So there was this very interesting conversation that happened, and that's actually what I wanted to talk about how if the space is called Two Rivers, how do we celebrate the river? The Geechee River, in particular, because the retail site, you must have stopped me, I sort of run out, I'm not sure how far I'm in time. The Geechee River runs along this edge, and how do we make this and that connect? So we can hold on to the Two Rivers concept, because in a way this concept was turning its back on the rivers. So we asked them to push the development onto the river as close as we can, but that created a challenge because it meant that the place where people move in terms of the retail and the mixed-use hub to sort of a 20-meter level difference with the water. And we realized that we need to change that. So we asked them firstly to create a connection space, which they then developed this geometry. And then I did these sketches to explain to them that I really want this space where the river runs and the space that connects with the heart of the retail component together properly. I want to connect them at grade. So the architects came back. We did that, so we could do this. Actually, that's a very good drawing to show. Sorry, I'll just flip past it. That shows the 2 rivers, and that's the retail component. So we've asked for that connection to be strengthened, because it's not just about this. It's about all this other development, which is about 200,000 square meters of bulk. So the architect sends me this email. I don't know if you had a chance to read that. So they say it looks like it can work. So this is the scheme that we got back, and we finally started to connect at this level, but we still had this very severe parking basement that connected to the river, and so there was a concept of greening that facade. And then there was a kind of a breakthrough moment where we said, okay, well, if we're going to be doing and connecting the river, we might as well do it in a grand way. And this is this Dunbar Vessel van Dyke's beautiful hand sketch showing that. And we then started developing some of the geometries for the landscape. And we want to see how this landscape can start influencing this very rigid built form. And then it started pushing forward and pushing back. So what this started doing is starting to respond to the river, which we were very excited about. And this has now created a forum space which looks out onto a riverside park. And then we marked up the drawings, and this is a process that a lot of architects are familiar with. So the 3D guys, and they started developing this. So we built this landscape in 3D, and then plugged it in and pushed their building back. And then we created a plan. And that the space that we then allowed us to actually upgrade this river into an asset or an amenity. for the whole development, not just this mixed-use development, but for the entire development. So you create this idea forum that looks at spaces that talk about landscape and how that whole facade has been sliced open to acknowledge that space, which goes all the way down and wraps around the other side. Oops. Sorry, one too fast. That's just another image of that. So from something that quite a blunt and turn it back on the development, we managed to create this space, which the client is incredibly excited about. We're excited about building it in the near future. And then what we did is we expanded that idea to the greater master plan environment. So this is the Gisha River, which is quite a small river, and as I said, the spaces allowed us to purify this water through a system of ponds and canals. And by the time it comes out here, the water is much better than when it came in at the top. So this brought me to the question again, what does landscape architects do and what the perception is? And I think this is true because, like I said in the beginning, landscape architects do diverse things. Some of them do environmental work, some of them do horticultural work, some of them do landscapes, and some of them sort of dabble with architecture. So it is confusing. And this is how we as landscape architects define ourselves, and so we're also very confused about what we're doing, and we're still trying to find out how we operate this or how we do work as landscape architects, but I think it's a good thing. And that'll bring us to new avenues if we keep exploring those definitions. And so we have the same problem in our office, so we're not really sure what we do as landscape architects in our office. And in conclusion, I think, are we still okay? Am I ahead of time? Okay. So in conclusion, I think, as I said in the beginning, if you stand back and see that everything that you look at forms part of the landscape, we should attempt to understand its makeup. Once we start to understand this, we can be more inclusive in our decision-making process. The lines between disciplines blur, interlock, superimpose, and merge, which is infinitely more exciting than finding one's own profession. I think that's it. Thanks.
Anton, thank you very much for that.